Washington, thanks for joining us. This is the Ingraham Angle. All right, we have so much news for you tonight. We could actually use 2 hours, but we're only going to take one. We have an infuriating opening segment for you. Congress, get this, is spending your money to cover up sexual harassment and some major developing stories for you on other fronts. President Trump returned moments ago from his 12-day trip to Asia. We're going to have a report about what he's doing next. And why are immigration agents complaining about the president? We'll tell you that as well. And Attorney General Jeff Sessions testified today before Congress about possible investigations into Hillary Clinton and that Uranium One deal. What's coming? Well, we'll tell you. But first, our top story, pulling back the curtain, sexual harassment inside the halls of Congress and how you're paying for the secret settlements. Sexual misconduct scandals have engulfed Hollywood, media, and now politics with the Roy Moore revelations. But did you know that you've been funding payoffs for congressional harassment claims for decades? According to the Congressional Office of Compliance, between 1997 and 2014, hundreds of women have been paid $15.2 million in total in awards and settlements for Capitol Hill workplace violations. The House Administration Committee held a hearing on the matter yesterday.
In fact, there are 2 members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, right now, who have been subject to review or not have been subject to review, but have engaged in sexual harassment.
This member asked a staffer to bring them over some materials to their residence. And the young staffer, as a young woman, went there and was greeted with a member in a towel, who was a male, who then invited her in. At that point, he decided to expose himself. She left, and then she quit her job.
Joining us now for reaction here in Washington is Jenny Beth Martin. She's the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She has a new piece on this growing scandal. And Scott Bolden, former chairman of the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C., and a former sex crimes prosecutor. Jenny Beth, let's start with you. This is so ridiculous.
It's outrageous.
$15.2 million, and this was started by Senator I really respect and admire, Chuck Grassley. What was the thinking behind this? And we'll go into the procedures that women have to go through.
Well, it was part of the Congressional Accountability Act, which, you know, looking back on, yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, at the time they were trying to make Congress live under the laws that they had passed, including Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. They were trying to make sure that they lived under several other laws, and they also wanted to create something to deal with sexual harassment. But in doing this, they have instituted a culture of corruption, and they have created much more intimidation for people who want to step forward.
Scott, let me share this with you. This is the Office of Compliance, the steps a woman has to go through to file a complaint.
Sure.
First, the victims get, I think we have a graphic, 180 days to complain. Okay, that's not bad. But you should get a little bit more if you're traumatized. Victims who want to continue must start 30 days of mediation. So they force you into mediation. Then finally, the Office of Compliance Administration does a hearing, or you can file a federal lawsuit, and it's all confidential. The problem, of course, is pushing women into mediation, and it seems to be geared toward stopping the claim. If I look at this as a former attorney, this is kind of pushing women, oh, you don't really want to file this, 30 days of mediation.
Well, this is all about power. And within that mediation, it's also a counseling piece. And when I first read this, I said, what are they counseling the women on? Either this happened or it didn't happen. But again, this is all about power. Remember, elected officials on the Hill are products, if you will. And this, the other thing that you didn't show was the lack of disclosure unless they go to court. So this is all very confidential. And it's all about taking care of each other as opposed to pulling the sheets off of it, if you will, and saying, listen, we got a problem. I think the Republicans and the Democrats on the Hill have a chance to lead by fixing this.
It's a slush hush fund.
I call it the shush.
Yeah.
The shush.
Right.
Yeah,
fund.
don't say anything.
And it's actually mandatory counseling. And if you've been traumatized, do you really want your employer mandating that you must go to counseling before you can go to mediation?
So now the Senate is working on mandatory sexual harassment training in the Senate. The House still hasn't really been able to push through changes. I know Congresswoman Spire, who I usually don't agree with on much, but she's right on this. They want to get rid of that wait time for being able to push through and actually file an actual complaint.
But Laura, you know, in the Reformation or the amendment to this legislation on both sides, you've got to make it uncomfortable for bad behavior. You have to be intentional about it. One of the most shocking things you led with was that the public tax dollars are paying for these settlements.
$15 million.
Exactly. That's about a million a year, a little less than $1 million a year. And you know what? If you remove that rule and made the congressmen either get employment defense insurance or made them pay out of their campaign PAC funds and stuff, I tell you, you would force a lot less of this bad behavior because that hits them where their pockets are.
I have a question. There was a point in this research that I was reading today that apparently a congresswoman was warning about the congressmen who sleep in their offices. Like those are the ones you have to, I mean, I don't know if that's fair because I know some who sleep in there, they're great people.
Right.
But apparently that's a problem. What is really going on here, though? Like, what is it just the usual stuff where you get into a position of power, maybe you were kind of a geeky guy in high school or college,
Right.
You didn't really have a lot of chicks, and then you get to Capitol Hill, it's all these 22-year-old gals running around, and this is nothing new. I mean, I remember being in the White House elevator during the Reagan administration, and Strom Thurmond made a few interesting comments to me, and that, I was 22 years old, and I just was like laughing at it. It's not a big deal, but you also don't want to chill the workplace either. That's another thing I am a little bit worried about here, where you can't even say to someone, "Oh, you look great, nice dress." Like, people are afraid. I know now men who are afraid to have any interaction at any time with a woman alone because 10 years later, even if you didn't do anything, you can be accused of something. Then where do you go to defend yourself? You can't defend yourself. So we have to look at the other side here as well and not make it so sterile and antiseptic a workplace that no one even enjoys the job. You're so afraid of saying anything.
Right. Well, you always have to be careful because the plaintiff's bar has made it that way. The reality, though, is that women are standing up now in the last 6 months to a year and saying, "Me too." And I think that's the difference because as you see each of these industries go with these disclosures, whether it's Hollywood or some other industry, now you're seeing the government. And now if the government who enforces and makes laws, if they won't lead on this, then I got to tell you, we're in the space of the hypocrisy bucket, if you will.
Grassley said it's, if this law isn't working, you should revise it, change it. I mean, I guess after the Packwood thing, they thought this was actually going to accomplish something, but why did it take so long for this to get so much notice? It's just Harvey Weinstein and all the other stuff swirling around. I guess it's just what people are talking about. So now, like, okay, Congress, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think that may be some of it, and now we're getting a little bit of light shed on it. Until a week and a half ago, I didn't even know this fund existed. But I tell you what, it's intimidating. If you're a woman who truly has been harassed by a member of Congress, you need to be able to address that and to have it handled, not be told you must go to counseling, you must go to mediation, we're going to have you sign an NDA, you can never tell anyone. It's all designed to shame the woman. Whether they intend to or not, you wind up shaming the victim. And I understand also you've got to make sure.
Harvey Weinstein went around trying to get non-disclosures too, right?
Yeah.
Well, he paid a lot of money
he paid
also.
a lot of money.
Well,
and let's not forget, men and young boys have been
victimized here.
Victimized, abused, and oftentimes this happens in Hollywood, but not only Hollywood. It happens in the theater. And I've been hearing about this for a long time. We're talking about Congress because we're here in Washington and they're the ones supposed to be the lawmakers, but this is across the board, and it's people in positions of power who usually have some problem within themselves. They're either they have no self-esteem, or their father didn't love them. I don't know what it is, but they don't know how to treat people, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn how to treat people better.
Well, that transparency that transparency that we're talking about, and Congresswoman Spire's talking about, is going to make it uncomfortable. This is a place of power. Careers are made or lost, and so you've got to make it a safe space for women and men who are victimized by sexual harassment to come forward, to be protected, and quite frankly, if there is transparency, I think you'd see less bad behavior.
There are people who make false charges. That does happen. And you can't just say anyone who makes a charge, you know, we're going to throw laurels around your neck. I mean, it's not necessarily the case. I mean, you do have a presumption of innocence. And sometimes I think in this climate, it's so white hot. I'm not talking about Roy Moore. I'm talking just in general. It's so white hot that if a woman who seems fairly credible makes a charge, your career is over.
Yeah, you know,
your career is over.
You have to allow people, if you've been accused of it, you have to be given the opportunity to defend yourself and to clear your name. And you can't just try everything in the court of public opinion. There has to be a proper process.
And is that where the confidentiality comes into play? I mean, are you going to go into Congress and have all these interns running around if you think that, my gosh, at any moment, you know, I open the door for someone, or I'm going to be accused of being demeaning or you got to be careful how you do this, because you could go way overboard on the other side.
But one way to address that issue is, as a former sex crimes prosecutor, we would require corroboration. I mean, the cases where it's one person's word against another, there's no scientific evidence, there's no corroboration whether there was more than a sexual touching or not, it still has to be corroborated. And I think that standard would be good in Congress too, because then you'd have that balance, if you will, because the congressmen want to get reelected, okay? They don't want bad press, and they don't want to have to go defend their conduct.
I have a question about that with the sex crimes. In how many cases, where it's usually men, of course, are accused of sex crimes, domestic abuse, is substance abuse involved? How often?
You know what? Quite a bit. I mean, you're testing my memory, but I would say not the majority, but at least over 50%.
Really, not the majority? I would say.
Well, over 50%. I just don't know how much. But there are other socioeconomic factors that come into play. And the other thing is getting women to come forward and prosecute if the father and the husband is the top breadwinner or is needed at home with the kids. I got to tell you, some women in that position just don't feel like they have many choices, and they drop charges against the very people who have abused them.
Well, and a lot of times abuse is simply about power. It's not about substance
sex.
abuse. It's not even about sex. It's about power, raw power.
You guys, great to see you. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
And directly ahead, new fallout in the Roy Moore scandal. How will Alabama voters deal with Washington meddling in the state Senate race? Plus, Roy Moore just addressed this controversy moments ago. We'll play you the tape.
I'm the only one that can unite Democrats and Republicans. Because I seem to be opposed by both. They've spent over $30 million trying to take me out.
Those comments from Roy Moore just moments ago after an eventful and chaotic day in the Alabama Senate race. The Republican National Committee has announced it is withdrawing support for Judge Moore's candidacy and pulling out of a joint fundraising agreement for the Alabama special Senate election. And this is all in response to multiple allegations now that Moore had made unwanted sexual advances toward teenagers back in the 70s. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is even floating the idea of Attorney General Jeff Sessions returning to his old Senate seat.
The Alabamian who would fit that standard would be the Attorney General, who's totally well known and extremely popular in Alabama. I've spoken with the President. He called me from Vietnam largely about this on Friday. I talked to General Kelly on Saturday, the Vice President yesterday. Obviously, we're in discussion here about how to salvage this seat if possible.
But it's not all bad news for Judge Moore. Alabama Republican Party Chairwoman Terry Lathan has not turned on Moore yet and told local media yesterday, quote, "It would be a serious error for any current elected GOP official or candidate to publicly endorse another party's candidate, an independent or a third-party candidate or a write-in candidate in a general election as well," close quote. And a new poll from Fox 10 in Alabama shows Moore leads his Democratic opponent, Doug Jones, by 6 points. Joining us now for reaction in Birmingham is Alabama's Secretary of State John Merrill, in New York, conservative commentator Monica Crowley, and here with me in Washington is Catherine Mangu Ward, who's editor-in-chief of Reason magazine. Great to see all of you. Monica, let's start with you. This has been a wild few days on this Roy Moore situation. You got the establishment types turned on him pretty fast, but then you had Mike Lee in Utah, senator from Utah. You had Ted Cruz, and now my colleague Sean Hannity says basically you have 24 hours to clear up the discrepancies in your statements. How can Roy Moore possibly hang in under these circumstances?
I'm not sure he can, Laura. I mean, there's certain political realities at play here, and gravity does tend to kick in, especially when the money starts to disappear. The RNC pulled the funding as well as the field operation that they were going to implement to get out the vote for Roy Moore. With those two things missing, Laura, I don't see how he's able to survive. It doesn't sound tonight like he's willing to go anywhere yet, but when these realities start to kick in over the next 24 hours, when the money disappears, you know, you can't run a campaign on fumes or love. That, I think, is when the hard choices are going to come in front of Roy Moore, when he doesn't have the institutional support to continue this campaign.
Let's go to the Secretary of State, John Merrill. John, what happens if the election is held and those absentee ballots are left over if, in fact, Roy Moore steps aside, the party, you know, relinquishes any connection to Roy Moore? Do the absentee ballots still count in that case?
Well, Laura, they do, and I think it's very important for your viewers to note that our people have been voting since October the 18th. That's when the absentee ballots first went out for consideration and for our voters to be able to have their opinion known and have their voice heard. And that's not just the UOCAVA military overseas voters, that's a number of voters throughout the entire state of Alabama. I think it's important to note that if Judge Moore withdraws from the campaign or if the state party disavows their association with Judge Moore and determines that they no longer support him, and both of those actions have to take place formally by them indicating to our office that they no longer wish to pursue the candidacy of Judge Roy Moore in the U.S. Senate, that even though Judge Moore's name will still be on the ballot, if he gets the most votes as a plurality winner on December the 12th, then our election will be null and void.
Catherine, now Mitch McConnell is saying perhaps they won't seat him, or that once he's in, if he gets elected, indeed gets elected, that they'll move to remove him. Now, if you're someone in the South and, you know, you may even follow this much and maybe think Roy Moore will like dating 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds, it might come across to you as this is the old guard telling the Southerners they're a stupid bunch of yahoo hayseed types, and they might just be like, you know something? He's seated. This is just another example of the elites kicking people like us around.
I mean, I think this is Congress reaping the fact that they are wildly unpopular. Congress has like a 19% approval rating.
That high?
I know. It sounds almost.
I don't think so.
And the idea that they don't have the trust of the American people, that they are not in a position to say, hey, this is an extraordinary circumstance. We want to take the high road here. We want to do an investigation. I would love to see them do an investigation through a trusted third party. They don't have to take the Washington Post word for it. They don't even have to believe the Oppo research if that's what they think is going on. But I do think they need to take it seriously, particularly if they want to say, listen, we're better than the Democratic Party, who's constantly apologizing for their guys when they get accused of this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, Monica, need we go back to the Menendez trial? And, you know, we might have a deadlock situation there now, but there was a time where there were allegations, and Daily News and a lot of publications went with them, that, you know, allegedly he took trips to the Dominican Republic and had, you know, relationships, sexual in nature, with underage hookers. I don't recall a single Democrat calling for his resignation. Same thing with the old story about Barney Frank all those years ago, and many others. So, you know, the Democrats seem to cover for their own, but I guess the Republicans, they want to come across looking a lot better than that.
Well, Democrats have always circled the wagons and protected their candidates and protected their presidents and protected their own for a really long time. And Republicans always went into the circular firing squad, Laura. But I think what makes these cases so different right now is that we are in a completely different cultural moment with all of these stories of sexual harassment coming out of Hollywood and the media elite, the modeling world, the music world, and so on, that given this moment, these folks cannot survive it. And even folks at the high end in the leadership of both parties and both establishments, et cetera, are now no longer saying that this is acceptable and are less willing, Laura, to cover for these folks. And you're seeing it now happening on both sides. And that's why I think in the Roy Moore situation, in many ways, he is going to be a casualty of this moment. And whereas perhaps he may have survived. Look, Donald Trump, in the tail end of the campaign with the Access Hollywood tape, he was able to sort of harness a boomerang effect where people felt that was a pile-on, and they came out and rallied around him. But Donald Trump was an exceptional figure, and I'm not so sure that Roy Moore is going to be able to do it. That's right.
Moore is not Donald Trump. Secretary of State, I just want to just close out with you. In your estimation right now, I know you're still kind of standing behind Roy Moore. Does he stay in this race, and does he get elected?
Well, I think it would be highly unusual for Judge Moore to step aside. That would be against every type of example that he has set. I don't see him getting out of the race. I think the party of, well, I'll tell you, it's going to be extremely close, Laura. And I hear mixed reviews all around the state of Alabama. This is a very disconcerting time for our state, and this is not the way we like to be featured in the national limelight. I assure you.
No, I can't imagine. Thanks for joining us, John. And I'm going to hold over Catherine and Monica because President Trump just a short time ago returned to Washington after that very long 12-day, 5-nation Asia trip where America's trade deals were a major topic. And I guess we're going to go right to it right now.
Very proud of it. From a standpoint of security and safety, military, very proud, and trade, you will see numbers that you won't believe over the years. Because over a period of years, they will be treating us much differently than they have in the past. People were taking advantage, countries were taking advantage of the United States, more than just this region, but the world. And those days are over. We're going to be fair, we're going to be reciprocal. As I said in my remarks before, we will be reciprocal, meaning if they're doing it, we're doing it.
Catherine, what did you think about this trip? Give us your assessment.
So my overall assessment is I'm glad that the president didn't do anything that isn't fundamentally reversible, that is something that can't be papered over later, because there was a real risk that he was going to make good on his campaign promises, go to Asia, and just light the whole thing on fire.
What do you mean?
Well, he's been quite clear that he doesn't like the status quo in terms of U.S. trade agreements in Asia. And
you like the status quo?
I like the status quo.
Which part of $360 billion trade deficit do you like?
I'd like more to have more trade. I'd like to have more open trade. I think the idea of thinking about it in terms of deficits is wrongheaded. We absolutely benefit from trading with other countries.
Because you can buy a $7.99 pair of pants?
Absolutely.
And so to hell with the American workers back here, it doesn't matter?
A $7.99 pair of pants really
to
benefits
fundamentally change the country?
I don't think it fundamentally changes the country. We're a country founded on
free trade. So you don't have a problem with our enriching...
founded on...
Every president, almost every president put in effect tariffs. Republican presidents, Democrat presidents,
and
Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan.
When their goal was to get a kind of one-upsmanship on other nations.
You don't think America should have a one-upsmanship attitude toward other nations?
No, I think we should have a cooperative attitude, and I think if they want to sell us stuff, we should be allowed to buy it.
But you don't think bilateral trade agreements are better for policing them and for making sure they're actually enforced? What's wrong with that?
I would take any trade agreements. What I don't want to see is us pulling back from the world at a time that we are anxious and we are not necessarily going to make that decision about what's right for workers and for buyers.
I see what Catherine's saying, but I don't see any indication, frankly, that Donald Trump is pulling back from the rest of the world. My gosh, he went to Saudi Arabia, Israel, went to see the Pope, did the trip to Europe. He's gone to Asia. I mean, I think his foreign trips, frankly, have been pretty succciceral, especially the trip to visit our NATO allies and the first trip to Saudi Arabia. And I think this trip turned out great. I don't get the grousing about this.
I totally agree, Laura. And I think, in some ways he's much more effective when he's abroad rather than at home. His speeches abroad have been absolutely magnificent. And what he was able to accomplish on this Asia trip has been quite extraordinary. What we're hearing is behind closed doors, this president applied a lot of pressure on the Chinese leadership. And there were two main issues that he was there to discuss. We're talking about trade and the structural trade imbalance with the Chinese that has been in place now for decades. And it's going to be incredibly difficult to reverse. But what the president is saying is, look, I need to deal with this structural trade imbalance. I'm going to do it via economic and trade policy tools and instruments.
And he also turned up the heat, Monica, on North Korea and told the Chinese, we need your help. We need real help. And yet we're not going to be patsies on the trade deal. We want to work with other nations. We want to trade with them. We want to have relationships with them.
That's right.
The only country we can't have a relationship with is Russia. Because the Chinese communists are great, but the Russians are the worst. So every time someone says we should do more with China, I say, okay, then why shouldn't we work more with Russia? Because of, Bob Mueller, I guess.
And to that point, Laura, what the president was able to do, and we'll see whether this really bears fruit. But what was so effective is he coupled the North Korean cooperation on North Korea with the economic policies.
All right, both of you, we could talk forever about this. Thank you so much for joining us. And when we return, Jeff Sessions grilled on Capitol Hill today, and a special counsel may be appointed to investigate Hillary Clinton. Really? Stay tuned.
What's it going to take, if all that, not to mention the dossier information, what's it going to take to actually get a special counsel?
Welcome back. As we've been reporting, after years of rumors, comedian Louis C.K. has finally admitted to sexual misconduct. In the fallout, C.K. was dropped from performing at Jon Stewart's annual Night of Too Many Stars. It's a charity event which benefits autism programs. Stewart, a longtime friend of C.K.'s, was out promoting the event today. Throughout his entire career, remember, Louis C.K. told filthy, disgusting sexual jokes, touching on his own proclivities. Yet Jon Stewart offered this response when questioned on the Today Show.
What was the impact on you when you heard not only the accusations but his admission?
Stunned, I think. You know, you give your friends the benefit of the doubt.
You were stunned about the accusations and revelations? Really, John? I heard the man's act for 3 minutes and knew he was a total perv. Comedians joked about his habits for years, and rumors of his misdeeds have been reported since back in 2012. So I guess Mr. Daly Show wasn't as well informed as we all thought. The only thing I can support is his autism fundraiser, which is great. And as for Louis C.K., he was dealt another setback today. International distributors announced that they were joining their American counterparts and dropping distribution of his latest movie, I Love You, Daddy, which is another filthy thing. And I'm sure it'll be available on his website soon, so all the dirty old men who chase underage girls can have a good laugh. What a degenerate. Attorney General Jeff Sessions was in the hot seat today, testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. Republicans wanted to know why the Justice Department hasn't investigated Hillary Clinton scandals. And as for the Democrats, surprise, surprise, they spent their time focusing on Mr. Sessions' past statements about meetings with, wait for it, Russians, and his private conversations with President Trump.
You made statements that he did, in fact, at the meeting. I pushed back.
You know that.
I can't be able to be put in a position where I can't explain.
I'm asking you.
I'm not going to be able to answer if I can't answer completely.
Did Donald Trump ever ask you to pledge an oath of loyalty to him?
No.
If Donald Trump were to ask you to pledge loyalty to him or to take such an oath, would you do so?
Well, I don't know what a pledge of a loyalty oath is. I met with the ambassador in my office with at least 2 of my staff, senior respected patriots, colonels retired in the Army,
and Mr. Attorney
nothing
General,
improper occurred at all.
Once and for all, can we answer the question?
I am once and for all answering the question, Congressman. I don't understand why you won't take my answer.
Joining us now for reaction is a member of that House Judiciary Committee, Andy Biggs, a Republican from Arizona. I often think about, what I would do if I remember Congress and I had to be at these hearings, Congressman. But this kind of took the cake. I mean, Jeff Sessions sitting there, and basically every 5 seconds from a Democrat, you're basically lying, Senator Sessions, Attorney General Sessions. You really met with the Russians, and you're really part of the collusion. Give us a sense inside that room today.
No, you're exactly right. So it showed the stark difference between the Republicans who are trying to get the Attorney General to do something, appoint a special counsel to investigate, and the Democrats who are they're fixated on trying to paint him as some kind of lying colluder with Russia. I mean, with no evidence. It's just amazing to me.
And by the way, we invited Sheila Jackson Leon, but apparently she was involved in a late-night briefing on the tax reform bill, so maybe they're going to come all along with you guys on tax reform.
It could happen.
Yeah, so and we invited a bunch of other Democrats because he wanted to have both sides on the show tonight, so I have to say that. Let's talk about that flashpoint today, and then we'll play the soundbite. This was Congressman Jim Jordan, who was on with us last night, and I think this was probably the most interesting moment at today's hearing. Let's listen.
If you're now just considering, what's it going to take to get a special counsel? We know that former FBI Director James Comey misled the American people in the summer of 2016 when he called the Clinton investigation a matter. It's obviously an investigation.
It would take a factual basis that meets the standards of the appointment of a special counsel.
That's what it looks like. And I'm asking you, doesn't that warrant, in addition to all the things we know about James Comey in 2016, doesn't that warrant naming a second special counsel?
Looks like is not enough basis to appoint a special counsel.
What's your sense here? Are you on the special counsel bandwagon on this? Because there's an argument against special counsel that I find fairly persuasive.
In this case, I am, because you've got an attorney general who's kind of left it away. He's stepped away from it, and we have to get to the bottom of this. That we know that there's conflicts of interest all in that AG's office, so we need a special prosecutor, special counsel, in my opinion. I think Jim's right. We've been waiting for a long time, and you know, yesterday, we get the notice saying, hey, we're considering it, after months of us asking.
Don't you think that looks kind of like a tit for tat? I mean, we got the Mueller investigation of Trump. Then it looks like, to some people, that President Trump is pressuring Congress to do a special counsel to go after Hillary and Clinton Foundation, Uranium One. And Jeff Sessions really isn't recused, I don't think, from anything involving Hillary Clinton. He's recused himself from anything involving the Russian investigation. But I think he's well within his right in this case to appoint a terrific prosecutor with a great team of assistant prosecutors to do this job. And then you won't have this sprawling investigation that goes on and on forever, frankly, waste the taxpayers' dollars. And I don't think it's necessary in this case. Sessions can just appoint a great prosecutor and do the real investigation. Why do you need a whole merry band of prosecutors waste our money?
Well, I think you're right in the sense that Jeff Sessions could, but look who his chief deputies are. You got Ron Rosenstein, you've got Andrew McCabe, Rod, and you've got Andrew McCabe still in that office influencing things. And I think walking away today, I think many of us said, I don't know if Attorney General Sessions believes he has the authority or if he doesn't have the authority. And that's why we kept coming back to the same questions. And so, you know, we want to get this investigated. You know, if it doesn't take one, fine.
Congressman Biggs, great to see you, as
Thank
always. And for more analysis, let's bring in two top legal experts from Columbia, South Carolina, Saul Weisenberg, who was Ken Starr's deputy in the investigations into Bill Clinton scandals, and here in Washington, Joe DeGeneva, former U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. All right, gentlemen, take it away. Let's talk first about the idea of a special counsel. Andy McCarthy in National Review, I think, makes a compelling case that in this issue of Uranium One or the Clinton Foundation, Hillary's emails, that a line prosecutor, a well-respected prosecutor, could actually handle this case well. Joe.
Yeah, clearly this does not require a special counsel. I agree with Andy 100%. And there's ample predicate factual information for an investigation right now for a grand jury based on the Clinton Foundation, the $500,000 to the president during the consideration of Uranium One, $145 million to the Clinton Foundation, everything involving all the things that you've listed, especially the email server involving Mrs. Clinton. There's no doubt that the standard Justice Department Criminal Division can handle this. There's no need for a special counsel. And by the way, what I found fascinating about the Attorney General's answer today was he said when there's a sufficient factual predicate for a special counsel. Guess what? There's no factual predicate for Robert Mueller. There's been no crime ever announced that he was investigating. So, I mean, to me, if you were going to do a special counsel, you can do it if you want to. I would give it to the Criminal Division in Main Justice and let them run with it. There's plenty of predicate, lots of information.
Saul, look, with all your experience with Ken Starr's investigation, you know how these things start. They start as one thing, they become something much bigger. And in the case of it, we don't have an independent counsel now. The statute's expired, but we can still appoint special counsels. In this case, with all the questions now about how they were trying to influence and stop witnesses from testifying before Congress, the shady dealings with the briberies and kickbacks involved with that Uranium One. I mean, uranium, 20% to the Russians. I mean, I think anyone off the street would say that was a crazy idea.
Well, let's focus on whether or not a special counsel would be appropriate, and I disagree with Joe on this. I think, first of all, the special counsel regulation is relatively vague. It says if there's a conflict of interest or extraordinary circumstances. Here you have President Trump, who has repeatedly called for his Justice Department to investigate this issue. And we're just talking about Uranium One here. I'm not talking about Fusion GPS, because I think that's already within Mueller's bailiwick. But President Trump has said, you need to investigate, you need to investigate. So on the one hand, if Sessions says, I'm going to find somebody within DOJ to do it, the Democrats are going to cry foul and say, this is outrageous, you're doing this for political reasons. On the other hand, if Sessions takes a look at it and says, I don't think there's anything there, the people on the right are going to scream and say, well, that's because Rod Rosenstein's involved, and he was U.S. attorney in Maryland when some of this stuff took place. So I think there are extraordinary circumstances. You can have a lot of the stuff running around about the Uranium One investigation. We don't know if it's true or not true. I think you appoint an honest broker who is special counsel, who is well respected. It's by no means automatic that they'll expand it. Senator Danforth didn't expand his investigation into Waco. He kept it very limited. I just think I understand what you're saying. I understand what Joe is saying. These investigations can get out of hand.
Oh, it goes for years. Lawrence Walsh, how long did that go, Saul? Was that 7 years?
That's true, but here,
my gosh.
The president, like he has in so many situations, unfortunately, by opening his mouth, has made things much more difficult for Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, it's better for him just to hang back. Yeah, I agree with that. I think we all probably agree with that. That it's better for the president not to comment on ongoing investigations in general. Joe, you agree?
Yeah, that would be good. By the way, if Jeff Sessions wants to appoint a special counsel, it's okay with me. My point is very simple. The Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation, all the kickbacks require an investigation. There is now existing a sufficient predicate for a federal grand jury. There has been one for more than 4 years in existence. I don't give a damn who investigates it. It needs to be investigated.
It's great to have you both on, Saul and Joe. Thanks so much. And when we come back, ICE agents are now up in arms. Why they say Obama-era holdovers are causing havoc and even putting agents' lives at risk. Next. Welcome back. In a surprising move, the union that represents ICE officers has launched a new website claiming that President Trump has, quote, betrayed them. The National ICE Council endorsed Donald Trump in the 2016 election, but the group is now upset that the Trump administration has been really slow to reverse the policies of the Obama years. A post on the website reads, in part, quote, while officers view the president's position on enforcement as courageous, the Trump administration has left all of the Obama managers and leadership in place. Tensions are on the rise between Trump's army and Obama holdovers. So joining us now for reaction from Orlando, David Ward, a board member of the National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers, and here in Washington, Stephen Dinan, a reporter with the Washington Times who wrote about this today. Stephen, this is odd, but it's something we've heard about in other departments. What is the percentage of Obama holdovers still working within Immigration Customs Enforcement?
Yeah, so the ICE Council didn't say the number, and they actually didn't even name names. They left it vague for now, but they went through a number of different issues. The website's actually fascinating. Not only does it give this sort of overall sense for the Obama holdovers, it gives a whole bunch of different specific examples of where those are having an effect, including an incident in Philadelphia where ICE officers who went into a very bad neighborhood of Philadelphia were told they had to remove their bulletproof vests to go make an arrest because it would offend the community where they were going into.
It offends them, David. It offends the ICE officers, does it not, when they get shot because they're not wearing a bulletproof vest for fear that it will offend, I guess, one of the illegal immigrants? I mean, what are we talking about here? This is insanity.
It is insanity. We've lost over 162 immigration agents killed in the line of duty. And for a manager to come up with an order such as that to take off their bulletproof vests because they're going into a neighborhood is absolutely insane. In fact, that manager or those people involved in that should be removed from their office for incompetency.
And do we have any idea, David, how many Obama holdovers are clogging the the administration here at the Immigration's Custom Enforcement? I mean, the website is very fuzzy on this. We don't know how many. Is it 12? Is it 500? I mean, what are we talking about?
Well, the Trump administration has been in office for 11 months now, and the swamp is pretty big and it's vast within the federal government. It's going to take time to weed out those that are sworn to their office as the oath that they took, those that have sworn to the globalism which brought us sanctuary cities and lack of enforcement of Title VIII, and it's going to take a while to weed those people out.
Stephen, let's talk about how the priorities of President Trump and Obama do differ. Whether you have the right people in place, that's infuriating. But I remember the ICE officers during Obama's 2 terms. The morale was horribly low because they wanted to do their job and they were held back.
Yeah, no, and there's no question. In fact, I think there's not a single department and probably not a single agency other than ICE where there's been as big a change in the culture between the Obama administration and the Trump administration. As you look, we actually did calculations. Under the Obama administration, upwards of 80% of illegal immigrants were put out of bounds for deportation because of the priorities that the previous administration set out. Now the number is probably closer to only about 1 million. Basically, DACA recipients are the folks who are put completely out of bounds, and the rest of the 11 million illegal immigrants are at least potential targets for deportation. It's made a huge difference for those ICE officers that we were talking about, and they'll admit they're thrilled with that sort of the overall direction that they're getting from President Trump. The issue is that the actual specific decisions, such as the Philadelphia one we talked about, there's a case out of Utah where they are told they have to give heads up before they go into the community. In some cases, 7 days heads up before they go out to make arrests. Lo and behold, when they finally get there, the illegal immigrants they're targeting have been tipped off and have basically fled. So those are the sorts of specifics that they would like to get cleaned up. But they absolutely appreciate the difference in the top-down direction.
David, I remember a couple of years back when the Border Patrol is different from the ICE officers, but the Border Patrol under Obama were told that they couldn't shoot at a vehicle that was attempting to run them down. That was one of the other crazy things. And again, here they are. They don't make a lot of money. They're trying to do their job. It's very dangerous, and oftentimes they're in very remote areas. But in other cases, they're actually being targeted by the illegal immigrants who are trying to get into the country. Because they're all valedictorians, I know that. But they're trying to get into the country, and I guess the ICE officers just have to jump out of the way and hope for the best. Or the Border Patrol officers.
Under the 8 years of the previous administration, immigration enforcement became probably the most dysfunctional I'd seen it in 34 years of working for the agency enforcing immigration law. Now, when Trump came into office, the apprehension rate went up 37% in the first 4 months by these agents being allowed to do their jobs that they took an oath to do. And now we need to get the managers in there that are going to back these men up under the same guidelines by standing up for their oath that they took and follow the law. Title VIII is very clear. Trump has been criticized about creating things when in fact he hasn't. It's the immigration law that's been on the books from day one. The Democrats, the previous administration, refused to go by it. Jay Johnson was loath to even read the book, let alone let the guys go out and do their jobs. So we have an administration now. I would say that it's going to take a little bit of time to clean out the swamp like he's been trying to do. But another thing, he's faced with the obstruction of Congress and the Senate on getting his appointees into office.
I got to I mean, Stevens, we're out of time on that, but he has to get his people in place. He's not going to eliminate all the positions. He has to get his people in place. He's being undercut, by the way, at that climate event.
If you have moderate to severe...
And before we go tonight, a quick reminder, check out my new book, Billionaire at the Barricades, because I take you through the immigration wars of the past 25 years, between the populace and the old establishment. And as you just heard in our previous block, we are still fighting those same battles today. Amazing. That is